I'm gonna keep these blurry background tips super basic and non-techy for you because we all love to have a blurry background. I get this question all the time, and the really simple answer is you have to create some depth of field. You have to put yourself as far away from your background as you can get and as close to your lens as you can get, whether you're using a camera or an iPhone or a webcam. There's just something about a blurry background that we all love. It's like comforting or something. It feels good to the eyes and it looks a little bit more high-end. But the truth is you don't really have to have high-end equipment to get that high-end blurry background look. So let's talk about it. So the first thing I want to mention is that the best blurry background look that you're going to achieve will be if you shoot your videos with a blurry background. Meaning, if you're going to use apps or try and edit it after the fact, I know there are ways to do that, but it's never going to look quite as good, quite as natural as if you simply have your setup set up to create a blurry background. So I already mentioned the least expensive fix for a blurry background is to simply create some depth. It's literally depth of field that creates that blurry background. So you need to be as far away from your background as you can get and as close to your camera lens as you can get. This is a really common mistake that I like to call the mugshot mistake, where you think you've got your background, I'm just gonna stand in front of my background and shoot my video. And what ends up happening is it looks like you're in a mugshot. All you have to do is just take as many steps as you can away from your background as you possibly can. Now, if you're using a camera and you're using it in fully automatic mode, I have a couple of videos where I walk through the simple video settings to put the camera in manual mode, which is really going to give you a little bit more control over the blur in your background. But if you're using it in automatic mode or you're using your phone or your webcam, those devices are trying to do all of the calculations that it can to make sure that you're properly exposed. And sometimes when the cameras are trying to do that automatically, it's not really taking into account that you want to have that beautiful blurry background. It just wants to make sure that you're lit up correctly. So a simple thing that you can do in any kind of automatic mode is to give yourself lots of really good lighting. This could be daylight if you're in front of a window, not direct sunlight, but lots of nice ambient light shining on you, or you could use two box lights like what I have shining on me right now because it's dark outside. Okay, so you're gonna give yourself lots of space away from your background and you're gonna give yourself plenty of light to work with. But let's go a little bit deeper. If you really wanna have control over the blur in your background, you're gonna have to do everything I just said, and you're going to have to put your camera in manual mode. You can adjust your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. So the first thing that you're going to adjust is your shutter speed. If you're recording your video at 30 frames per second, then your shutter speed should be set at 1/60th. Aperture settings you have available on your camera are going to be determined by what your lens is capable of here. So for a blurry background, you want your f-stop number to be as low as you can get it. For a lot of kit lenses that come with a camera, the lowest f-stop you may be able to get is like a 3.5. And to be honest with you, yes, you can still get a blurry background with your f-stop at 3.5, but you're gonna have to, like I said, give yourself lots of space behind you and give your camera lots of light to work with. But it won't be that beautiful eyeball soothing background that you're probably after. So if you can, you may want to invest in a lens that can have a lower f-stop, like a 1.8 or a 1.6. And we'll talk more about lenses in just a minute. So you're going to put your f-stop at the lowest number, and then you're going to adjust your ISO. That's the third adjustment that you're going to make, is adjust that ISO. That's going to help you get that properly exposed image or video. What this means is that you're going to have to kind of Goldilocks it a little bit. You don't want your image or your video to be too dark. You don't want it to be too light. You want to use that exposure scale and get it as close to the middle as you can so that you know you and everything in your frame is properly exposed. The actual number you set for your ISO is completely dependent on how much light you have. So it totally depends on your camera, your lens, your lighting, your room, the light coming in your windows. It's going to be different for everybody. That's why you have to fiddle with it a little bit. This is why your lighting is so important, because the harder that your camera has to try and compensate for poor lighting or inadequate or even average lighting, the poorer the quality of your video is actually going to be. Technically speaking, you really want your ISO number to be as low as you can get it while still being properly exposed. Just to give you some context, like I said, I have 2 box lights shining on me. There is no light coming in through my window, and my ISO is at 100. My f-stop is at f1.8 right now. Now, I said that we would talk about lenses, and if you have watched any of my more recent videos, you know I have mentioned the Sigma 16mm lens, like I don't even know how many times now. I recommend this lens if you're using a Canon camera or even a Sony camera, and the reason why I like it is because it improves the quality, the overall quality of your video image, but it also helps you achieve that nice blurry background. So the f-stop on the Sigma 16mm can go down to 1.4. I usually don't go lower than 1.8 because I don't like to have my nose in focus and my ears out of focus. It can get really dicey at those lower numbers. Of course, I'll put a link to the cameras that I use and that Sigma 16mm lens and the lights that I use down in the description below this video if you want to have a setup exactly like mine and get a blurred background exactly like mine. And when I'm talking about the lens, I always like to mention that one of the beautiful things about it is that you can create that depth behind you without actually having depth behind you. So my shelves are right here. I can touch them with my hands. It looks like they're further away from me than they are, and that's because I'm creating that depth of field with the fancy lens. Now, if you're recording your videos on your phone or your webcam, pretty much everything I said still applies. You may have to fiddle with it, but all of the settings and the concept is still the same. So I hope I kept my promise of keeping this very basic and non-techy. And if you want to learn how to use your camera to create videos in manual mode, again, keeping it basic and as non-techy as I can, I've queued up my next video for you over there on the simple video settings for manual mode. Now, I'm using a Canon M50 Mark II for that video, but the settings apply no matter what camera you're using. So I'll see you over there.